Picture this. You've just slaughtered up to 70,000 soldiers of the greatest empire on Earth in a single afternoon. You've entirely wiped out their field army. The path to their capital is wide open. But instead of marching in and taking the crown, you slowly watch your own empire crumble over the next 14 years. Welcome to this explainer on Hannibal Barca, where we're going to dive into one of the absolute most fascinating and honestly paradoxical military campaigns in human history. So how exactly does history's greatest general pull off the ultimate tactical victory, completely destroy an empire's army, but still lose the war? I mean, Hannibal set a gold standard for battlefield brilliance that generals literally still study today. So why didn't he march on Rome? How does a commander who seems to do everything perfectly on the battlefield actually end up losing the whole shebang? Well, we're going to unpack this terrifying clash between tactical genius and strategic reality. Section 1. A Vow of Eternal Hatred. To figure this out, we've got to rewind a bit to establish the incredibly intense personal stakes that fueled this conflict. Meet Hannibal Barca. He wasn't just some soldier. He was the heir to a deep, burning family vendetta. You see, he was born into a prominent Carthaginian military family right after Carthage's devastating defeat to Rome in the First Punic War. His father, Hannibal Barca, was a leading general who had to watch his homeland get stripped of territories like Sicily and saddled with these massively humiliating tributes. So the Barcid family was deeply, deeply embittered. And nothing illustrates this psychological engine better than this wild story. Before his dad, Hamilcar, headed off to expand Carthaginian power in Spain, he invited his 9-year-old son to join him. But there was a major catch. According to the ancient historian Polybius, Hamilcar actually led young Hannibal to a sacrificial altar, made him lay his hand on the victim, and take a literal blood oath to never be a friend to Rome. And Hannibal? Well, he took that vow gladly, and it became the singular obsession of his entire life. Section 2. Crossing the Impossible Alps. This lifelong vendetta led to one of the most audacious military maneuvers ever recorded. I mean, bringing the fight directly to Rome's doorstep. Hannibal knew for a fact he couldn't beat Rome at sea. So, after capturing the Roman allied city of Saguntum in Spain in 219 BC, he decided on a land invasion. He departed with a massive force of 50,000 infantry, 9,000 cavalry, and a corps of North African war elephants. He marched over the Pyrenees, pushed through southern France, and then, in the autumn of 218 BC, he did the absolute unthinkable. He marched his army right over the treacherous Alps in just 17 days, battling blizzards, freezing temperatures, and hostile mountain tribes the whole way. But the toll of this was just brutal. By the time Hannibal finally descended into the plains of northern Italy, his army was winnowed down to just 26,000 men. Nearly half his force and almost all of his war elephants were dead. But you know what? Despite being battered, exhausted, and deep in enemy territory, Hannibal was exactly where he wanted to be. Section 3. The Tactical Masterpiece of Cannae. So after some early, frankly shocking victories at Trebia and Lake Trasimene, Hannibal achieved his absolute tactical masterpiece at the Battle of Cannae in 216 BC. Now, set the scene. On one side, you have Hannibal's army, a smaller, lightly armored, diverse coalition of Iberian swordsmen, Celtic Gauls, and African infantry. On the other side, Rome had raised a staggering army of up to 80,000 men. This was a massive, uniform, heavily armored war machine relying on one incredibly simple tactic: a brutal, overwhelming frontal assault. Rome's commander, Varro, was eager for a fight and super overconfident. Hannibal totally knew this, and he used it right against him. Here's exactly how he pulled off his famous double envelopment maneuver. First, he placed his lightest troops in the center, physically bowing the line outward toward the Romans. As the heavy Roman infantry slammed into them, the Carthaginian center intentionally gave way, bending backward. The Romans, thinking they were totally winning, surged forward right into the pocket. And then, bam, the trap sprang. Hannibal's heavily armed African infantry pivoted and attacked the Roman flanks. At the exact same time, his superior cavalry routed the Roman horsemen and swung completely around to close the rear. The entire Roman army was completely encircled. And the reality inside that circle? Utterly horrific. The heavily armored Romans were pressed in so tightly by the shrinking pocket that they actually lost the physical space required to swing their swords or even thrust their spears. It just became a pure slaughter. The historian Livy describes this unimaginable despair, noting that some soldiers found after the battle had suffocated themselves by burying their own heads in the dirt, just to escape the nightmare.
In a single day, an estimated 70,000 Roman soldiers were annihilated. It remains one of the bloodiest single days of combat in human history. Hannibal had achieved an impossible, decisive victory against a far superior force.
Section 4. Why not march on Rome? So this brings us back to our core mystery. With Rome's field army completely destroyed and the Republic in a state of absolute panic, why didn't Hannibal just press his advantage and march straight on the capital? This quote right here marks the exact moment where tactical brilliance collides with strategic reality. After Cannae, Hannibal's cavalry commander, Hannibal, practically begged him to march on Rome, promising they could literally be dining in the capital within 5 days. When Hannibal hesitated, Hannibal delivered this stinging rebuke. But was Hannibal just being timid? Actually, no, not at all. The crucial thing to understand here is the total logistical nightmare Hannibal was facing. First off, Rome was a walled city, and Hannibal completely lacked the specialized siege engines needed to breach it. Second, his own government back in Carthage, bogged down by internal politics and costs, repeatedly refused to send him significant reinforcements or money. Third, and honestly most importantly, Rome's alliance system gave them a seemingly bottomless pool of manpower. Seriously, even after losing 70,000 men, Rome just lowered the draft age, freed slaves to fight, and just kept raising new armies. And then, the Romans totally changed the rules of the game. Led by dictator Quintus Fabius Maximus, Rome adopted what we now call the Fabian strategy. They just completely stopped fighting Hannibal in pitched open battles. Instead, they shadowed his movements, harassed his foragers, and systematically starved his supply lines. They essentially trapped him in a war of attrition that he simply did not have the resources to win. Section 5. The ultimate strategic failure. So Hannibal is trapped in southern Italy without any real means to take the capital, meaning his amazing tactical victories begin to matter less and less. Over the next decade, we see the slow, grinding collapse of the Carthaginian position. While Hannibal is stuck in Italy, Rome leverages its massive manpower, fielding up to 185,000 men by 212 BC. They send armies to systematically dismantle Carthage's empire abroad. By 206 BC, Carthaginian rule in Spain completely collapses. Finally, the Romans just bypass Hannibal entirely and launch a direct invasion of North Africa, which forces Carthage to recall Hannibal to defend the homeland he hadn't even seen since he was a little boy. The climax of this decades-long struggle finally happened in 202 BC at the Battle of Zama. Here, a brilliant Roman general named Scipio Africanus, who had actually carefully studied Hannibal's own tactics, used them right against him. Hannibal suffered his final, crushing defeat. Carthage's will to fight was broken, and their imperial ambitions were ended forever. Section 6. Hannibal's enduring military legacy. So, what should we really take away from this epic clash of ancient superpowers? It leaves us with this powerful historical insight. Hannibal mastered the art of the battle, absolutely, but Rome mastered the art of the war. Spectacular battlefield tactics, surprise maneuvers, and even wiping out 70,000 enemy troops in a single day, they all mean very little if you lack the grand strategy, the logistics, and the political backing to actually secure a lasting victory. It's a fascinating paradox that really forces us to ask ourselves, in our own pursuits, are we just winning the immediate battles, or do we actually have a strategy to win the war?